Aloha everyone, and welcome to the next video on analyzing literature. Today we're going to talk about hunting themes. So we're going to talk about how, as you're reading a book, you can start to pay attention to and identify potential themes that the author is putting forward. And of course, we'll continue using the classic of Mice and Men to discuss examples of that in action. Okay. The first way you can try to find a theme is to look at the protagonist and examine the conflict he or she or they are facing. Every book has a conflict, and within that conflict somewhere is a theme, or usually multiple themes. In the case of Mice and Men, we find out in chapter 1 that they're facing difficulty just surviving in the Great Depression, finding a job, having enough money to have food, that kind of thing. And of course, what they truly want, their own home. And you can also see in chapter 1 the theme of friendship. Each of these is a challenge presented in chapter 1. Survival, they're just having trouble maintaining a job, enough to survive. They talk about wanting a home. But we know that in the Great Depression, that will be a challenge. The world, the society, conflicts with that idea. It's not going to be easy. And their friendship has some conflict in it too, because George has the responsibility of keeping them going and taking care of Lenny, and that can be stressful and frustrating. So these conflicts, just in chapter 1, can give you an idea of some potential themes. So you're going to want to think in your book, like, what are the main conflicts the protagonist is facing? And what could the author be saying through those conflicts? Another way to examine the theme is to look at the protagonist again and look at changes he or she is going through throughout the course of the book. A good book will always have a protagonist who develops. The way of thinking changes and adapts as the book goes on. So you're going to want to pay attention to those changes because the author is usually trying to say something specific. In Of Mice and Men, George goes from somewhat harsh and callous to Lenny in chapter 1 to in chapter 6, truly realizing how much he depends on Lenny and how much he cares about Lenny. And he also admits to going from the kind of person who has hope and has a reason to keep going. Lenny is his purpose. To once he decides that he has to kill Lenny and the dream is off, he realizes that he will become just another ranch hand who cares for no one or nothing. So those changes get to important themes. Themes like the importance of friendship. Without friendship, it's tough to have purpose in life. And survival. You have to have a reason, a purpose for surviving in a meaningful way. And when George loses that, his life is going to change. So in your book, as you're tracking character, which we've already talked about, wrapped up in that is also potential themes. So pay attention to those changes a character goes through and try to figure out what the author's saying about topics. The third way is to zoom out from the basic plot line and try to look at the society the author is presenting and what he or she might be saying about society or the world through the book. In Of Mice and Men, the society they're dealing with is the United States in the midst of the Great Depression. And people, in Steinbeck's view, became selfish and cold and unempathetic toward each other, which you can see in the ranch hands, and that's what makes Lenny and George different. They care about each other. They have a purpose. They have something and someone to live for. So Steinbeck is not just telling the story of Lenny and George, he's also commenting on the effect of the Great Depression on people, the effect of the setting and the time period. So in your book, it's likely that your author has some comment he or she is making about whatever society they're describing. Could be a futuristic society that they're using to critique our current society. Or even if it's a society you're not really thinking about, like a lot of teen books, they'll take place in high school settings. And a lot of those books have this critique of the way teenagers conduct themselves toward each other. There's bullying, there's cliques and means, like think of Mean Girls, like that kind of thing. Or it could be the educational system they're criticizing. Or it could be, if a book takes place in the suburbs, the author could be criticizing how in the suburbs everybody tries to stay the same, everybody tries to conform. So pay attention to those big ideas. Zoom out every once in a while and look at a bigger scope for what the author might be trying to say. And finally, there are some tried and true themes in literature that authors always go back to. So if you're having trouble identifying a singular theme for your book, try thinking about some of the classic themes. Maybe they fit. So some classic themes are things like, so a very abbreviated list of those classic themes would be things like rite of passage / coming of age / loss of innocence. They're all kind of wrapped up together. The idea of maturing, getting older, seeing the world for what it really is, losing your innocent view of everything. You're coming of age, you have a more adult perspective. That's a classic theme of especially like teen literature. The idea of perseverance, overcoming obstacles, continuing to struggle to overcome something. Friendship is a classic theme. Family is a classic theme. Love is a classic theme. Man against nature, you have books like Hatchet, where somebody's dropped in the middle of nature and they have to survive. Morality, a person's understanding of right and wrong. The effects of technology on society, that's a especially popular one these days. Power and corruption, and the way those two things are tied together. How with power often comes corruption, or the desire for power. Sacrifice, someone sacrificing their own well-being for the good of others. That's a pretty classic theme. Isolation, and someone is isolated either emotionally, psychologically, physically, how they cope with that. And then there's mortality, which is different from morality. Morality is right and wrong. Mortality is understanding of death. So it's the concept of death and coming to grips with the fact that we will all die. That's another classic theme of literature. Now, that's just a small list, but you can certainly find something in there, and, you can think of others. But once you find whatever theme works with your book, you're not done, because you have to figure out, most importantly, what is the author's point about that theme. So it's all well and good to say, well, the theme is family. That's not enough. What is the author's point about family? He or she has to have a point they're making about family. Family is difficult. Family creates stress, but they provide a foundation. Family is comfort, where you can go when the world is chaotic. You can always find peace within your family. There could be a million ideas about family. You can't just say the theme is family and then stop there. You have to figure out what is the actual point the author is making about that theme. And those, my friends, are some ways to hunt themes in literature. That's all for today. Mindeman out.